This is great. All right, let's get started. In recent time, there's been a renewed interest in the 19th century movement to abolish slavery in America, and the degree to which local communities supported this movement throughout the United States. This has been written several years ago by, like I said, it's a work in progress. This has only increased. The whole business about not only the abolitionism, the whole notion of the Civil War in that regard, and also Reconstruction, really a major turning in American history. And the Freedom Trail, by the way, the History Center is the priests, right? Doctors, priests, have done a really wonderful job of documenting Grant County's role in that. And also, I would refer you to Wiki Marion, which is a really short, but really excellent video. It's free. Just wikimarion.org, and you go there. It contains a whole bunch of stuff, Underground Railroad, and so on. So there are materials available. Okay, now I want to talk about Gerard Polycarp Riley in that regard. He was born in 1821 in Claremont, Ohio. Any Buckeyes in the crowd? Claremont? Have you heard of Claremont? It's well, as you can
Marion, Ohio.
Oh, Marion, no, you came directly.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Claremont is down about one county over from Cincinnati, east. I believe it's fairly close across the river from Mesa, I think. All right. And of course, Cincinnati during this time period, you know, from 1821 into the Civil War, was a major juncture of trade and commerce on the routes to the interior for the United States. And Claremont was not. It was a rural county. People engaged in farming. It's claim to fame, though, not our man Gerard Polycarp Riley, but it was General Ulysses S. Grant from there as well. And our hero, Mr. Riley, knew the Grant family. And I'm not sure how well acquainted, but they were neighbors. I mean, everybody knew everybody. The Rileys ran a mill, so they started a farm and then they ran a mill exclusively for the grinding corn and wheat. Nearby was the village of Ripley. Ripley, Ohio is like, you know, if you visit the Underground Railroad Museum in Cincinnati, it can deal with the Ohio part of it. Ripley was the home of John Rankin, who was a major figure in the Underground Railroad, who was thought to be the inspiration in part for one of the characters in Uncle Tom's Cabin. And near the Riley farm, the U.S. Senator Thomas Morris. And Thomas Morris was an early proponent of abolition on the national stage. Now, you should know that abolitionism was not a popular view. It was in certain quarters, right? But it was certainly a minority view in the American population in the 1820s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. There were people who were in favor of slavery. There were people who tolerated slavery. There were people who were, I guess, ambivalent. People who thought it was unpleasant and terrible, but hey, what can I do? You know, that sort of stuff. I would say it replicates when you get a really controversial issue. Generally, in the United States. You sort of, people sort of, slipped out in those categories. The Riley family was from, and I always tell students this, if you, the rest of an answer when they say, well, where was this American person from in the 19th century? If you said the magic words, North Carolina, if you're talking about the Midwest. There's two actually. The other one is Pennsylvania. But if you said North Carolina, you would be correct. The Rileys spread out over the interior of the United States. They settled in Kentucky and Arkansas, but Riley's father planted them in Ohio. And when Riley was 14, the family sold the farm and purchased a mill property. Okay, education. And education was limited. There were a few opportunities, but in the areas formed by the Northwest Territory, Ohio being part of that, education was a requirement. Free public education was mandated. I mean, it was, they had to set aside, I think every 16th township and the sale of those lands were to be used for the establishment of school. It said that he was, he recalled he was barely able to read the New Testament as a child. At one point, he injured his foot chopping wood. Oh man, anybody have experience chopping wood? You know that's an easy thing to have happen. It said he was laid up for the winter, and his grandfather, George Swing. Now, George Swing is probably, I don't know how well noted he has been, but over in Southern Ohio, he's important as an outspoken abolitionist. But what grandfather Swing did was writing books to read, and Riley credits his grandfather for lifelong learning. He enrolled in the Claremont Academy. Now, when you say it's a general all-purpose term for secondary school of some kind. You probably went in there when you were after 6th grade. Most people got basic literacy and ciphering, and then boom, they were out, back on the farm. But I think Riley's foot injury allowed him then to pursue a little more formally his Claremont Academy. Now, he was a precocious child. He sort of reminds me of a guy in the shows on him, or oh shoot, but the guy was really smart.
Sheldon.
Pardon?
It's the name of the show. Big
Yeah.
Bang Theory,
Oh.
Sheldon.
Yeah. Okay, because it says the teachers, Riley became curious about the change from immersion to sprinkling in church history. The teachers suggested Riley might find an answer in the library of Roman Catholic Bishop John Purcell in Cincinnati. On a trip to the city to deliver lumber from his father's mill, Riley secured an interview with the bishop. So he went really curious and might have been obnoxious. I don't know, but pursue that. He attended Granville College. Now, this is something that almost nobody did in this time period. This would be like 1835 or so. But Granville College will later become Denison University. You've probably heard of Denison, a really highly regarded private institution. And he then took the job that any college graduate, almost any, took, was a school teacher, right? Went from college into school teaching, and that was usually like sort of intermediate profession. From there, you go to law school or read, well, not necessarily law school, you would read law with a local attorney or be apprenticed to a local doctor and go on to something else. In 1844, he married Sarah Blair Bethel. I feel I need to apologize a little bit for not doing more with Sarah, because she was very important to me. And maybe another time. Sarah was an inspiration to me. when you hear the rest of the stuff he did, he probably was not home a lot. Okay, but she was devoted, and they after 1911, both of them they were constant companions. Now, religion plays a central role in the life of the inhabitants. Excuse me. There we go. Right. This is, should have done this already. This is the Ohio circa 1820, a little before. Well, not actually before, but down here is Hamilton County, Ohio, which is where Cincinnati's at. And then right here, there's no turn. I'm sorry.
What's your feet wrapped around the cord, Bill?
Oh, at the end of the exciting program. Okay, so there's where our man is from, and the little town is over here. And you can see that it's across the river from Kentucky. All right, now Kentucky is a slave state at this time. All right, so the whole issue of slavery was really an in-your-face kind of thing. All right, so however you felt, there you are. And especially since the place to go to do any of your trading and business was Cincinnati, it was even more pronounced. Now, Riley decided early on to become a pastor, all right? And he was an early member of the Sugar Tree Run Wesleyan Church, established in Ohio by the Reverend S.H. Chase in 1845. Now, the Wesleyan Church, of course, is a big part of the history of Grant County, it still is. All right. The Wesleyan Church was founded in the state of New York, all right, by individuals, among which they certainly had other reasons, but the overriding reason was that they were anti-slavery. They were Methodists who wanted to convince the church to a much stronger anti-slavery position. The main line of Methodism, I guess we'll call it, didn't want to do that because Methodism was a huge established denomination. You know, in terms of the evangelicals in the United States, north and south, who were probably either a Methodist or a Baptist. Okay, now there were people that belonged to other denominations, but they were sort of the power churches in American moral life. And what the Wesleyans were up to was the church has got to take a stand in favor of the abolition of slavery. They also, another area of controversy, they also believed as an article of faith that in the complete and total integration of African Americans into American political life, social and politically, they advocated freedom and social and political equality. Now, our friends the Quakers certainly advocated the abolition of slavery, and some went the full route like the Wesleyans, and others did not. Okay, so in the minds of some, it was one thing to advocate abolition. Well, first of all, it was a major thing to advocate abolition, but then when you start talking about the next level for full social and political equality, you're getting into some pretty heavily biased areas. And if you know about the Seneca Falls, in Upper New York State, it was a Wesleyan chapel. And you know what happened at Seneca Falls? Okay, it was the women's movement. Okay, it was the effort of women to gain social and political equality. And interesting enough, during this time period, women were called in the Wesleyan church, called to the clergy. They could preach. Could not do that in the church. Okay, so it was, and the conflict was more intense than I can convey, because Riley, and not Riley in particular, but groups in Ohio, for example, and elsewhere that were advocating the Wesleyan position. I don't know if you've heard the term camaradeers. Camaradeers, that's where they would go to the local Methodist church and stand outside at the door and yell inside for their brothers and sisters, they would say, need to come out of there. Okay, and do the right thing, you know, and you know, you get the picture. Exciting church meeting, I guess. Okay. Now, Riley found a great deal of success as a young minister, and he wrote for a paper called The True Wesleyan. Okay. Now, the True Wesleyan. Oh man, I got to tell you a little historiography. I got a hold of the one by one the microfilms of the True Wesleyan, and I read through the whole thing from I think like 1831 to about 1861, and it was fascinating. Okay, now as an outsider to that denomination, I learned so much about what the Wesleyan history, but it was a really dynamic organization. They were very evangelical. They established districts all over the Midwest. Okay, as far as Indiana, they did some stuff in Illinois, but usually the big thrust was Ohio. It was close to New York, and you could get, you know, people back and forth. Pennsylvania, not so much for my family. So there were lots of Presbyterians and lots of Quakers. So let's go to Ohio. That's where our people are. Okay, and they also came to Indiana. And early on, they established a conference. It was not just this area, but it included right where we are. Okay, and so Riley said he became thoroughly imbued with the sinfulness of holding human beings as cattle. Okay, now he recalled a debate between himself and a slave-owning cousin, Marcus Clark of Kentucky, on the question, does the Bible justify slavery? He said the contest lasted for 2 days to an immense audience, and it resulted in the decision that he had won. Okay. Now we know that 2 days, that's still pretty well to keep an audience. Riley and his fellow parishioners back at Sugar Run were all active in the Underground Railroad. You may be familiar with Wilbur Seibert. Wilbur Seibert was a professor, I believe, at Ohio State in the day. Okay, you know, no, it's Ohio State. Get those guys confused. Okay, Seibert wrote after the Civil War. He did the first real sociological and political study of the abolition movement, the Underground Railroad. They've got it. Actually, it's part of the display downstairs. There's a really cool map. I love maps, by the way. You can flip them on. That's okay. All right, there's this map. What Seibert did was, by 1890, a lot of the original participants, black and white, were, you know, dying off, and so he wanted to record this, you know, for posterity, and so he made contact with Quaker organizations, with Wesleyan organizations, Methodist organizations, and to be fair, by the way, there were Methodists who never left the Methodist Church but supported abolition. They were in the minority, but they were, you know, there were individual churches. The same way with the disciples, same way with the Presbyterians. The Presbyterian congregation here in Marion, the first Presbyterian was there were a lot of records of abolitionist activity. Okay, so it was like what I would say, it's a here and then here and then here, you know, like hopscotches around the area. And his church in Claremont, Seibert listed 18 active participants. Of those, 13 including Gerard Wiley, were members of the Sugar Tree Wesleyan Church. Okay, so it was, and they were right across the river from Kentucky, and it wasn't just waiting till people came across the river. They were going across the river, you know, rowing across in their boats and meeting up with freed men and women and families who were being led to that area by a guy named John Fee. I don't know if you're familiar with John Fee, who was a major, like the major abolitionist in Kentucky. And I can't imagine how hard that must have been just to survive. Okay, he will later be one of the founders of Berea College. Yeah. Okay, Berea College, you know, was a center for this, and it's a wonder they survived. Okay, they had some difficult times. Okay,
And they were a bit further south.
yeah, right, yeah.
Right on the river.
Well, see, they were getting the folks from Tennessee. Okay, I mean, a little further, but it was a really dangerous thing. And he wrote extensively for the True Wesleyan. I won't, you know, I think it's great stuff, but it's long, this 19th century prose. But he wrote long dissertations about you cannot be a Christian and support slavery. Okay, it is evil, it's a sin against God, and not only you, but we will all be punished. And all, you know, Lincoln sort of, you know, in a much less inflammatory way. You know, what is it? I hesitate. I can't remember the exact words. If God is just, oh, that was Frederick Douglass. If God is just, we will be punished for this. Okay. Now, Riley, you can see already, was a man of principle. I mean, he practiced what he preached. Okay, and I love this story. Okay, so 1861, war breaks out. Riley is teaching school. He's the headmaster, and he was actively recruiting his 16, 17-year-old students to join the army. You know, now's your chance to strike a blow for freedom. You know, this is. I like to think of him as, you know, as he's talking, the battle hymn of the Republic is playing in the background. You know, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the vintage for the grapes of wrath restored. But Riley believed that. Okay, and he was telling his students that it was their duty, their obligation. Well, this is so great. One of the students got up and said, well, if this is such a noble thing, what are you going to do? I can just see students doing that. I mean, that's a permanent student thing, you know. Okay, you know, now Riley at this particular time was 41 years old. Okay, so he wasn't a kid, you know. That would have placed him in the older cohort of folks in the army, although they did, I mean, yes, there were a number of people. The great thing I used to tell students, which has been documented, that there were, you know, a couple, at least, of people that had fought in the Revolutionary War that were like 95 years old. And they tell a story about the guy getting his gun down from the mantelpiece. Oh, it was in Gettysburg. He went out in the battlefield. Okay. He said, I freed this country once, I can do it again. And we don't know what happened to him. I don't know how far he could get into the thing, but he did. Okay. Anyway, Riley decided that the student was right. And the next day he joined the army. Okay. They might have been getting rid of him. Well, that's the story. All right. So he joined the 50th Ohio. Anybody Civil War, big Civil War buff? I hesitate to talk about the Civil War. I mean, I like it, and I've read a lot. The people that are really into the Civil War are really into the Civil War. So I find when I talk about it, it's easy to make some egregious kind of mistakes. I will expect you to point them out, okay? Because I probably will. Okay, now he, being a pastor, was taken in as a chaplain. So he was chaplain to the 50th Ohio, and he was sent with the regiment to Kentucky, and they were almost immediately involved in the Battle of Perrysville, okay, which was, as I understand it, a significant battle in the sense that it effectively kept Kentucky loyal to the Union. I mean, the Confederates thought, oh, Kentucky, you know, that they're waiting for us, you know, the greatest with open arms. No, they didn't. Now, some did. But the Kentuckians, I think even some of the pro-slavery people were not particularly interested in that old Mississippian Jefferson Davis and the Georgia crowd. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, internal stuff going on there. But Perrysville was a major battle. Now, I found an account. This is great. I found a guy wrote, and there were a lot of regimental histories written after the Civil War. Okay, a guy named Lawrence Carr, who was in the 50th Ohio, recollects seeing Riley at the Battle of Perrysville in his shirt sleeves, assisting the surgeons and tending the wounded on the battlefield. It said the lad stared at him after calling Riley's name. He, the lad, was stopped by one of the wounded men. You must not bother him, youngster, you see. He's awfully busy, and even if he's a preacher, he is a brick. He was taking buckets of water out there. It was terribly hot. And people got up because of all these, everything. People were passing out, I mean, among other things. So, and now, he was a hero. And the 50th Ohio went on to be in several major engagements. Like I said, in Grant County, 34th, U.S. Volunteer Infantry from Grant County. You know, ended up at Vicksburg. They ended up down in Vicksburg. A lot of Indians died at Vicksburg. I think the 50th Ohio, ended up going east, and they were at Atlanta and so on. But what happened was, this did not satisfy. He didn't feel that being the chaplain to the 50th was enough, that he needed to do more, okay? And he was particularly disturbed. See, the Emancipation Proclamation had not been issued, and when it was, it didn't apply in Kentucky. You know, as you understand, what Lincoln did was essentially free the slaves in areas controlled by the Confederates. He did not free slaves that were in Union hands or remained in the Union. So Kentucky and Missouri, basically because Lincoln didn't want to leave. Okay. Now this was Riley couldn't really take this. Okay, and so he recalls an incident involving a slave named Dave, who Riley had in his protection. And after taking Dave to town with him, Riley came out of the store and interrupted two rough men, taking Dave, his servant, into custody. After a heated discussion, the two men left to report Riley to his superior officer. In the meantime, Riley put Dave on a boat that was preparing to sail, giving the fugitive the address of his farm in Ohio, his military hat. He sent Dave to safety. Now, this gets him in trouble. You see, commanders of a lot of the Union, you know, were not necessarily, well, most of them were not abolitionists. Now, and that whole idea about freeing the slaves was not worked out in people's minds. Okay, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Now, again, there was a strong, like Riley, there were strongly opposed to slavery people. But you see, he what do you want to say that I can return for this? He went against orders. Those slaves were to be taken to Louisville and they were to be put in prison as freed men. Okay, and the wives and children just had to like fend for themselves, hang around the outside of the prison. And Riley was appalled. He said these roundups in Louisville, Riley says every jail was full. Okay, and what happened was Kentucky law required the contrabands, that's what the freed men and women were called, contrabands were to be held 8 months before resale. Now the Kentucky legislature shortened imprisonment to 30 days, but it was horrible. I mean, they're starving, there's filth, there's diseases. And so what would happen too, you had masters who were not Confederates, all right, who were coming to the camps and producing, hey, okay, they need to come back with me and work the plantation. They're backing the slavery. Okay. Now, what happened was that, let's see, I need to go. What happened was that Riley decided he better get out of 50th Ohio. I mean, he was in trouble. And several of his co-workers or men and colleagues, okay, and so when Lincoln enacted, part of the Emancipation Proclamation says, and they shall be free and received into the army of the United States. Okay, now this was revolution. I mean, the whole thing was peanuts compared to that. Okay, so what Lincoln said is, okay, we are going to arm the slaves. We're going to accept them into the military. Okay, and they will be U.S. soldiers. Yeah, I think if you remember that movie Glory that was out many years ago, well, still a wonderful movie. There was they were all Union soldiers practically wore a leather band, same was a belt, but right in the middle was a badge that said U.S. a gold badge or bronze badge, right? And Frederick Douglass said, once you put a black man in the army and give him a gun and put that badge on his chest, you have made him a citizen of the United States. Right? There's no going back. And of course, we know that over the course of the year, over the Civil War, over 400,000 African Americans participated in the Union Army, U.S. colored troops. At least 8 African Americans from Grant County. There were more, but 8 from Grant County participated in the 24th U.S. colored troops. They enlisted at Jonesboro, and if you ever want, we can go into that some other time if you'd like. But there's a really terrific story there. Okay, now and what he did was he went out and recruited what was formerly called contrabands. He recruited them into the U.S. colored troops. And oops, I'll go backwards. Oh, there we go. There. It's a little hard to see because it was faded. The original was faded. The group that he worked with and got attached to, he was awarded a captain's rank in the 6th U.S. colored troops. Now, almost all of the officers of the colored troop regiments were white. Okay, therefore, if you watch again, Glory, the officer was white. I think down to there were sergeants, there were black sergeants, but I think once you got into the upper ranks, it was all white people. Not exactly, because later in the war, there were African Americans. They got to be majors in some cases. So but at this point, they were basically all black outfits, and they were led by by white officers. Okay, Riley and his outfit, they went from Pittsburgh or from Philadelphia. Okay, and they were sent to the peninsula, peninsula in Virginia, Yorktown, down there, and which was a major area of contention. You know, the Confederates all on that. It's just like Washington D.C., you know, and the Army of the Potomac. You know, they're facing off because it's almost like chess. You capture the king, the war's over. I mean, that was their thought, and so there was a violent contest. If you recall, Fredericksburg was a terrible slaughter of Union soldiers. And it was all about who was going to keep control of this area. And remember, the Confederate capital was in Virginia, okay, Richmond, right, along with a big prison holding Union soldiers. Okay, Riley continued his efforts to free enslaved people. Now, what had happened was, you know, that whole peninsula it's on the Potomac, but it's got, you know, river inlets and all that sort of stuff. That was prime plantation country. You wanted to be on the city side. Okay, well, in any event, Riley would take his men, small groups, and he would go across the river at night and go in rowboats. And what they were doing, a number of those plantations, the adults had, well, they had mobility. The slaves, you know, the freed men and women had mobility. Oftentimes the children did not. So the masters made an effort to keep the children close. All right, and then the parents would, you know, go off to the, you know, hide, and then they would join the men would join the army. But their children were still on those plantations. Now, without getting too deep in the weeds, you know, the children were preferred by slave owners. You bought slaves at age 8 to 10. Okay, 8 to 10. Now you bought adult slaves too, but see, the math was you figured that whatever slave you had, you got 10 years of work out of it. Okay, so when 10 years, if you had an 8 or 9-year-old, you got 18, 19. Okay, and also they were bred black and white, white and white. I mean, it was the owners. I mean, it was because each one of those folks, and you see prices from $350 to $2,000. Okay, and most of the owners' money was tied up in slaves, more so than in land and in crops. Okay, now this was before the, okay, but even during the war, they were commanding premium price. So the slave owners were keeping the children. Well, Riley just said, you know, this is an abomination. We're going to stop it. And so what they did was that in Matthews County, Virginia, they started an effort to rescue families of Union sympathizers. Okay, and then after brought up the family and 30 slaves, Riley and his men encountered a group of slave children and 5 others, they were determined to be in the most destitute condition. The master informed Riley that the mother of these children were dead and begged the soldiers not to forage on his property and kill his poultry. Sometime thereafter, Riley was informed that one of the contrabands that the mother was not dead but had been sold the day before, was being kept in county jail. So what he did, turning with his troops at 2 o'clock in the morning, he turned to, the guy's name was White, the plantation owner, and relieved him of both his slave children and his chickens. Riley told White, I want you to remember these things have come upon you as your punishment for your treatment of God's poor. He secured clothing and blankets for the children. Riley and his men took them to Eliza Yates, a Quaker lady, living in Yorktown. From there, the children were sent to the Colored Orphans Home in Philadelphia. The authors state that they prepared written copies of Riley's account for sale in order to benefit the children that were rescued. You are getting a unique experience tonight. I wrote this in 2002. Well, I have looked for years. What about that orphanage? Okay, so I found out a lot about the orphanage. Actually, I think the orphanage is still in operation under a different name. But it was a sort of a parallel to the one in New York that did the orphan train. New York children's, I can't remember. Okay, but anyways, I called out there and they go, yeah, we know that happened. Document. Okay, and then I called the Library of America, which is a for-profit library, and talked to a guy. He said, oh yeah, I heard about that. I don't know. He said, Marion, I said, well, I think we have something somewhere. You know, he said, where's somewhere? I'll have to look. Well, they couldn't find it. However, your intrepid speaker, I found it. Okay. On the Google machine. So, oh, there it is. There it is. There it is. Now you probably can't read it. As we found them, these children were owned by Thomas White of Matthews County, Virginia, until February 20th, when Captain Riley of the 6th U.S. Colored Troops took them and gave them to the Society of Friends to educate at the orphans' shelter. Profits from the sale for the benefit of these children. That was like what's it called? The V's, CVs, you ever seen those? Big collector's items now. You know, people gave calling cards and they put in a picture of themselves, you know, like grandma in finance or whatever, but they also were generals, they also were presidents, you know, it was almost like baseball cards, you know, but they were more important. They were actually a social thing. This is it. This is you know, pictures worth 1,000 words. I'm giving you both. Okay, but these children were held in slavery. Now they were symbolic also to life. He said, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, this is look, that's the rags that came off of the plantation. Okay, I'm interested in Mr. Thomas White. Okay, I found some records. Okay, Mr. White's plantation still exists. And it's not a bad looking place. It's not in his family. Okay. Anyways, so Riley, see, as a historian, what you got to do is document these coins. You know, like if he said he rescued the kid, that's a great story, but did he rescue the kid? Well, yes. And here's proof. Okay. Now the 6 U.S. Colored Troops. Oh man, you know, of course, that the colored troops were put up for. They were, because a lot of generals or commanders, they were expended. You know, I don't want you know, mothers and sisters and fathers in Ohio, because they're already racking up big casualties. You know, not until World War I we're going to get casualties like that. 5,000, 3,000, and you know, those mini balls that they use, shattered bones. And that's why after the war they refer to derogatorily in some cases to veterans as empty sleeves. By the way, we're not new in being ambivalent about veterans. You know what I'm saying? It's very sad. It's very sad. You know, homeless veterans that pay a huge price, not always honored for their sacrifice. And you know, you can go into the military hospital. A lot of those guys were empty sleeves or empty pack plays, whatever. Okay. But the 6 U.S. Colored Troops were at Petersburg. Now, if you saw the movie Cold Mountain, oh man, it's really, is amazing. Look, also, I think it's even more amazing in the book. It's about a Confederate soldier that was becoming, he actually was impressed into the war. You know, when the things got going really bad, there were like these guys that would range around themselves, a lot of them former slave hunters, hunting for white people and getting them into the army, you know, or killing them. Okay, it was a death sentence if you were caught malingering, okay, or whatever they called it. But anyways, the 6 U.S. colored was at Petersburg. So were the 8 men from Grant County. Okay, and they were the first across that field. The Confederates had a earthen embankment, which was a common thing, and they were firing from a not a bad position. And the soldiers from Michigan, who were miners, had dug a tunnel, and what they were going to do is dig a tunnel all the way under that earthen thing, send the soldiers into that, and then up the other side, and then attack the Confederates from its side. Well, if it sounds a little dumb idea, it was. It was because they ordered the troops out. They ordered the 24th Indiana. They ordered the 6th U.S. Pennsylvania U.S. colored troops. They get down in that tunnel, or actually they weren't in the tunnel. They were charging across the field. So they were doing the frontal attack, and there were other guys down there going, you know, well, something blew up in the tunnel. And then what happened was, if you were running across that field, the bottom fell out, and you were pitched into a crater. And the battle was called crater. And you fell down in there. Well, the Confederates up there had basically run out of ammunition. And so one of the things they did was they fixed bayonets and scared people. I mean, they were fighting. The next step, if Petersburg falls, then Richmond is next, which did happen eventually, but it didn't happen. Okay. So, and then after that, there was another one because that Peninsula campaign was still going on. I mean, the Confederates were holding on for dear life. Okay, and the 6th Pennsylvania was sent to dig a canal, hoping to, it's almost like Vicksburg. Oh, let's see, we'll dig a canal, you know, and then cut them off, you know. Well, it was the same sort of deal as the men were working out there, and Riley was there. What they were doing was the Confederate snipers were just picking people off, you know, just, you know, guys were out there. It was a big field, and it was just, you had your shovel and your pick. Okay, well, Riley said, well, Riley would suffer for the rest of his life from diseases. And that's usually, if you read a lot of Civil War pension records, like cholera, residual things, malaria, that sort of stuff, including anemic dysentery. I didn't call it this, but anemic dysentery. You just have it. Okay, now, so Riley, at the very end of the war, he was appointed occupation commander of Wilmington, North Carolina. And I called Wilmington, I called their Civil War Museum, and I said, I'm calling about a guy that was the occupation commander of Wilmington for the Union Army in 1855. And he said, boy, you called the wrong place. He said, now don't feel bad. He said, but you know what Sherman, those guys did? They burned up all our records. And so when they left, we burned up all theirs. It's kind of fair, isn't it? Well, anyway, so Riley said, what am I going to do? Okay, now he went back home and he went working at the mill, but the mill burnt down, which he took as God's message that you're not going to work at the mill. Okay, so his other occupation, of course, was preaching, you know, as a minister. So he picked up his credentials, ministry credentials, and he went out to Illinois for a while, which didn't work out. I don't know what the deal was, but the Wesleyan thing didn't really, well, the war was over for one thing. And it wasn't working out like he thought it would be. Now, this is something I found one little team mentioned in a true Wesleyan. but he accompanied the Jubilee Singers of Fisk University on their tour of Europe in 1875. When they met Queen Victoria. Okay, that's pretty cool. There we go. There are the Jubilee Singers. If you're into choirs and music, Fisk, of course, it would call it historically black college. It was not historically. It was founded, okay, for the purpose of providing advanced education for freed men and women and their children. Okay, and Fisk music department, what they did was they go out and they do the traditional choir things back then, you know, the classics and the German songs and all that. But the director of that group said, we got to do spirituals. And so, like, Go Down Moses, you know, you're probably familiar, they got a lot of hymns now. Okay, what they did was they exposed the American public and the world public to the musical tradition of slavery. Okay, an incredibly rich and very thing. And Riley was the chaperone. Okay, who went to saw the Queen. All right, now his next stop, Fairmount. Have any Fairmount folks here? Okay, big time. Oh no. Okay, he was the church. I mean, it wasn't like a choice. Okay, the church said you're going to Fairmount. Okay, now the town, of course, you know, founded by Quakers generally. Okay, it became a thriving village of nearly 400 by the time Riley got there. Okay, now it was served by the Big Four Railroad, and the town prospered by trade from nearby farms. They had sawmills and all that sort of stuff, and they were part of the gas for oil fields there. Okay, now the Fairmount Wesleyan Church had been founded in 1868. Okay, and of course, still, I don't know if this is 1868 building, but it's certainly could be. You know, it's an interesting thing. When I call around the churches, it's amazing how, because of the turnover in pastors and congregations, a lot of times don't keep the best records. However, the History Center has gobs of records about every church in Grant County, almost. So if you really want to get into it, that's the place to go. And they'll be delighted to assist you. Right, Mary? Right, Colin? Okay, a little commercial there. Okay, now, Riley, during his time in Fairmount, he settled upon the needs of children as his new mission. And he was always, you know, this is probably from his, well, he was a teacher, you know. Okay, and he published an 8-foot illustrated paper, The Child's Golden Voice. It was described in Brant Fuller's History of Grant County as intended to occupy an entirely new field, neither a Sabbath school nor secular paper, but supplies the long needed link between the two. Now, he was a media guy, right? Right? I mean, what blogs and churches now are really going through a lot of, you know, experimentation, a lot of those sort of things. Riley said, we got to do this. We got to speak to an audience. And that was the audience that he was interested in. Now, the publisher claimed a circulation of 6,000 in its first year. Now, he gave up the paper in 1890, claiming it to be too confining. I have not found one single copy anywhere. Of course, stuff like that are like comic books, you know. Now, although comic books were at a later time when I think people had a sense that these things, paper had great value. So, you know, if you got a first edition Superman, hey, you got retirement all taken care of. Okay, now, well, we're getting there. So I guess he fell out with the congregation. He got fat by the district. They had trial, and it was over the fact that Riley was, and journalism was an old style Wesley. He was pre-Civil War, social equality, freedom for blacks, women, and clergy, and there was a general retrenching of those views after the Civil War. Okay, where the focus became more on, well, it's the same sort of, not the same, but it's a similar discussion of what goes on now. How much should we be involved in social things, and how much should we be confine ourselves to, you know, the individual? And Riley was outraged. Now, I found an article in Fairmount News about it. When the Fairmount, when the camp meeting down there, you know, it's still there, when they have meetings, and he claimed that they were getting too emotional, you know, with the holiness thing. And he said, my congregation has left me, and they're out there waving their arms and carrying on when we got the world to change. I mean, it's sort of a neat summary. However you come down on that, it's sort of a neat summary of nothing changed. I mean, well, I shouldn't say that nothing changes, but it rhymes with a whole bunch of stuff today. Okay, so he said, I gotta find something else. You know, well, it did, they sacked him. So he joined Temple Congregational, which would be right next door to this place. Okay, and he also had very good relations with the Methodists here in town. He decided to start a ministry to children. Okay, and in particular boys. And this is hope I'm not boring. Okay, I figured you're gonna believe. Okay, let's see. Oh yes. Patent glass. Patent glass in Marion. Okay, 1908. Right, not that long ago. Okay, these are boys working the glass factory. Okay, West Marion, you know where Canton Glass was, just off Spencer, right? Okay, there's some remnants of Canton Glass, those warehouses, and, you know, one side of Spencer, and then the factory was on the other side. You know, there was it was a major company. They really did well. Okay, glass making was a highly skilled occupation, but they needed helpers. Okay, so there was a real disparity. You had the glass makers who were artists and really skilled, and then you had production workers, okay, packers and all that sort of stuff. But these guys, usually they use kids. You see this, what they were doing was they were working with the glass blowers and carrying, you know, on the pipe, you know, the long balls of glass that you know, there was, someone asked me about the glass making process. It was like a lathe, you know, where they could do the hot glass and turn out what they needed. I actually talked to not one of these guys, but a guy who later on, that was still going on for several years after that. I talked to a very old guy in 2000. He said, yeah, I worked in a glass factory when I was 10. And I said, how was it? And he said, bad, but they only hired him to work at night. Don't work them in the daytime, they pass out. You know, factories, no ventilation. I mean, you open the windows, okay? They were hot all the time. They were hot in the winter, they were hot in the summer. Okay. He said, well, but they were less hot at night. Okay, things would be a little cooler. So if you felt like you're going to pass out, the woman said, well, go out there and lay down in the yard, come back and got it. Okay, these pictures, by the way, were taken by Louis Wick-Hine, who was like a major photographer. Okay, he really is very important. You ever see that picture of guys working on the Empire State Building? They're all sitting on that beam having lunch. That's Louis Wick-Hine. He also, by the way, took a picture of Mrs. J.C. Wilson Bond, which is hanging in the house. She is pretty well to have Louis Wick-Hine. I mean, he charged, if you had any money, he charged the daylight out of you because he wasn't making money on this. Okay, so that's the Canton Glass. This is what you know, Riley is seeing. It's almost like the black children, you know, in the South. Wait a minute, this is not right. Okay, come on. Going wrong. Oh, okay. No, back one. Oh, this one. No, that's right. That's right. Okay, the title of this one is Boys That Worked in Glass Factory at Night and Went to School by Day. Worked the night shift, changing their school. I don't think they were. This was dress up for photograph. Okay, this is early Franklin School, not the one that's the remains are there. This is early. I think it was. I'm guessing it. I think it was where. Is it the River Church that was former Lincoln School? I think it was down there, but I'm not sure. Okay, but anyways, they're standing in front of the school. Now, okay, so these guys, this is what a young gentleman would wear. The thing is, look, you can't see it from here. You can see the guy's barefooted, he has no shoes. Okay, if you look at the original picture, you can see burn marks all up and down both of his legs. Okay, this is what, but the way Hein got those pictures was he pretended to be working for an insurance company and he'd tell the manager, look, let me take these pictures and take it back to the underwriters and we'll give you a bid on your insurance. You know, but otherwise they would have gone down. The next one is my favorite picture. This is Bill. And in a full print, he's carrying a milk can. Okay, and that is Canton glass. Okay, that's been sort of, what do you call it? No, it's a photographic technique, very effective. He worked the glass factories in the summertime, and then in the rest of the year, his widowed mother, they had a cow, and so they milk it. He'd take that milk around and sell it. You know, right? Somebody in here, maybe Bill's. You know, I tried to find that, and I can't. You know, it's beyond my core powers to find that. Okay, now this is the mission. Riley and his wife built a mission. Now, I don't know if you can see this. I fiddled with this for a long time. I'm not that good. Okay, you're familiar with the Sanborn maps? The library, if you're ever interested, the library can put you onto that. They are online, but they are such a pain to use. I mean, you can do it. The trouble is you also get into it and you get lost. You know, say, oh boy, I didn't know about this. And then the day's gone and you've not done anything on your project. Okay, down here this is West First Street. Okay. This is the Marion Ice Cold Storage Company right here. Okay. Now, this is Canton Glass. It's on the other side of Nelson. Okay. And so it's densely, there's a lot more too. And there's railroads. This is that Circle Railroad that, you know, they brought the trains and brought the cars around to pick up the stuff and then they could take it back out and hook it onto the larger freight trains. Okay. I looked and looked and looked. Where was this thing? I had an address. Okay. The address was 1719 and or 1721. Now, if you've done this looking up in Marion, you know the address has changed. It just did, okay? And so where you think it was grandma's house is not. But so you got to keep looking. What I did was I found a description of this place. And then I looked in the footprint. I looked for the footprint, and then I went out there and drove around at risk of life and limb. It was icy and snowing that day. I went out there. I found it. Okay. And oops. What happened? It's not there. Well, okay. Okay. What did I do? I thought I had what I had done. Okay, well, I guess I'm done. Okay. Well, if you want to answer to that riddle, you go out to 1719. Maybe cut them off because the file was too big. There's too much. Well, anyway, okay. Well, let me tell you, you can go out there, and what you'll see is like there's some PowerPoint. So okay, there's some these little houses, well, like industrial workers' houses. A number of them are still there and still occupied. If you know where Peerless is, Peerless, if you go, actually, if you're going the other direction, if you're going east from Peerless, which you can do, what you got is that bed where the railroad was, and then you got right. It sits way back up the road and it's sort of overgrown. Somebody years ago covered part of it with these hideous artificial stone stuff, like big rocks, looks at it. But it's still got the same footprint. Okay, he had a school, a study place, he had a chapel, and he had a playground. And then he had another building, and the only thing I can think of, it may have been where they lived. I think it is where they lived. Okay, the building where they live sits really on the alley between First and Main Road. You know, you can drive back in there. I didn't get shot or anything, so people must not care. But it's a stone house. Okay, not just this crappy sort of fake stuff, it's a real stone house. And Riley was known for his strictness. Okay, he got in trouble a few times for beating the kid. But okay, you know, I understand. But there were people that came to his defense in the Marion Chronicle and said, wait a minute, this guy's taking responsibility for these guys. They got something to eat, they got clothes, they had to go to church. I mean, this was the concept of how a mission should work. That's what he was trying to do. Okay, and a lot of people wrote later on how wrote the experience fondly, even though it was like a sort of little military school, you know. He'd go around with his wagon, and if he saw a loose kid, the man that can jump on the back of the wagon, you've got to go to church. Okay, you know a little Sunday school number, but you got rooms if you need something to wear. Okay, he really was a pioneer in this kind of thing, at least for Marion. Okay, one other thing, he when he wanted to build the thing, he went around to the church in Marion and said, absolutely not. No, not doing it. The Methodist Church right over here decided, the pastor decided to do it. They gave him a temporary place to hang out until they got the place built. And it outraged his congregation. As I'm not criticizing them, I mean, you're thinking about it. What happened was that they managed to stay there until they got the place built, and then it went on. And in 1911, both of the Rileys passed on. They had like 7 kids of their own, and they've all moved to other places. And that is Gerard. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Where's he buried?
Where's he buried at? Here?
Yes, he's buried at the Estate of Serenity. And when you go out there, it's in that, that circle that's sort of in the top of the place. You know, where you're getting, it's not the front of the place, you got the Quaker, the pioneer stuff. He's not there. He's up there where you're going to find early 20th century. Okay, and it's great. It's got Riley, nice big stone, and then it's got 2 small stones. It says, Father and Mother. He was addressed as Father Riley. Okay, and I was guessing Sarah was probably his mother. Okay. You know, we are surrounded by really wonderful people. Now, flawed, okay, but I mean, to do the things that he did, you know, and risk his life and really heroic stuff. And I'm sure his wife was heroic too, because she had a reason. I mean, and the system, you know, it's like you help your husband, and then you do all the household kind of tasks on top of that. All right,
We have time for maybe 2 more questions.
Any else? His sword is in Canada, but I tried to get the people talking to him. Some of the writers end up in Canada, and they have the sword. It's sold in the picture. But anyway, okay. All right.
Everyone give Bill a round of applause. Our next Carnegie lecture will be March 11th. It'll be a Saturday at 2 p.m. Diane Hunter of the Miami Nation will be coming down from Fort Wayne to give a lecture on modern Miami culture. So if you guys are around, please come again for that. And Again, thank you, Bill, for coming and telling us all about Gerard Riley.